Hello, I am Vasiliev, and this is the second part of my masterclass, which is devoted to processing, beloved by everyone. I hope you watched the first part, where we learned about how to create good originals, which will be interesting and high quality, with a thought-out plot, required colored scheme, and light. Today we will talk about Lightroom, about Photoshop, about the tools which I use for post-processing, about my personal method, and you will be able to apply these skills into your arsenal. And that's it. Let's not spend too much time on introductions, it is already not the first lesson. Let's just carry on. I begin my processing in Lightroom. Many people say, why do we need this Lightroom? I can process everything in Camera Raw itself in Photoshop. Why do I have to study and install some other software? Let's agree right away that Lightroom and Camera Raw are almost identical software. Regarding processing tools, regarding development of a RAW file, Lightroom is in fact Camera Raw. Same graphic engine, but I think at some point the management of Adobe understood that Lightroom, which is Camera Raw, is a powerful part of Photoshop and it could become an independent software. Very often, it is enough just to develop a RAW file in Lightroom and you don't have to open Photoshop for further processing. That's how Lightroom appeared. It was then upgraded with lots of useful tools which are not available in Camera Raw. First of all, the advantage of Lightroom is a large system of photo cataloging, providing the opportunity to create your own photo libraries. There you can select your structure of storage, you can tag photos and award them with grades, color codes, create groups. You can search photos by any parameter. It can be by detection of the model's face, by the aperture with which you took a photo, by ISO, by the date, by the title, by any possible parameter. This is a system of storage and search for your entire photo library. Someone uses it, others don't, but you need to know about its existence as it can be rather useful. Another significant advantage of Lightroom in comparison to Camera Raw is automation of your actions. First of all, you can catalog your presets, which enables you to apply them promptly and also synchronize your settings directly for a big series of photos. So, you can process one photo and you can apply this processing to the entire series. It could be an entire photo shoot. We will discuss it a bit later in more detail, just so you need to know why you need Lightroom. This software simplifies and speeds up your work, which is very important. There is always some patience limit for processing of a photo shoot. The faster you do it, the higher quality of your work will be. This sounded odd, but I hope you understand what I mean. You do high-quality work until your patience to process these photos is over. So you need to be on time. I don't want to discuss some really simple buttons, interfaces, basic settings, and opportunity of import-export at this lesson, as it will make it too long. I think such small technical details you can learn from any Lightroom manual lesson. I would like to show you my own way of processing, my logic, the tools I apply. I will show you the entire process from the very beginning, from the moment I download a photo into Lightroom until the final result. Let's start with a little logical task for you to solve. So, imagine the situation. It is the nearest future, and a photographer has a task to photograph some object, for example, a model for a portrait photo shoot. He arrives at a location, launches a bunch of drones, and they take thousands of photos of this model from all different angles and of perfect quality. So, my question is, will the profession of photography end with such technologies? At which point do we need a human in this situation? You can reply to this question somewhere in the comments and discuss the subject with me, but I'm convinced that it will make no impact to the photographer's profession. The major task of a photographer is selection of that very best shot, so nothing changes. Just nowadays, a photographer sees the appropriate angle, chooses it, and presses the button, take a photo. If we look at this situation of the nearest future, the only difference is that we already have the input photos to select the best originals for processing. Is this correct? I think it is. Why am I speaking about it? Because the first, and remember, a very important stage in your processing is sorting of the captured photos. This is the stage when you select the final shots to be processed. It is as important as photographing itself. So, first a photographer selects a shot with his camera, and then he has an opportunity to sit down at home or in his office and, thinking very carefully, once again select the best and final shots for processing without any hurry or pressure. And it is very important, it is important after the photo shoot to clear up your mind and try to analyze again the images you have captured. So how do I do it? There's an entire photo shoot downloaded into Lightroom. It lasted 1.5 hours, and there are more than 1,500 photos. Yes, this is a high quantity, yes. I make many repeat images, but there are several reasons for it. First of all, my eyesight is rather poor, so I don't always hit the right focus. Sometimes autofocus makes errors as well, so just in case, I take many repeat photos. Second, when I take photos, I try to think holistically about my image, about the composition, about the angle, about the pose of the model, so I don't notice some small details. A model might blink or she moves and an arm looks blurred. There might be some folds of the dress which look not so nice or some other deficiencies. When you spend a lot of time preparing for the photo shoot, you put a lot of effort and sometimes you invest money, so you always want to have high quality results. So, I intuitively want to photograph as much as possible, not to miss that very best shot, that exact angle, that perfect moment. But it is pain afterwards to sort out all the photos. Nevertheless, as I already mentioned, this stage is one of the most important. So, the process is as follows. First, I import the photos into Lightroom. I look through all of them and press 1 on the keyboard to star the images which are not defective. So there are no issues with the definition and quality. They are not blurred or spoiled in any other way. This way, I discriminate technically defective photos. Then I select only rated photos, which is filtering of the photos by rating, by which I select all the photos marked with 1 star. Then I once again look through the 1-star photos, and now my target is to compare between good quality shots. I compare this shot with this one and this one. They look rather equal. As I look through the photos a second time, I now grade some with 2 stars. Then I compare and select among the photos which are ranked with 2 stars. So the purpose of this process is not to select between a really bad shot with a normal one, but to sort out and choose between shots of equal quality. I can repeat this process of comparison as many times as required, awarding photos with 3 stars, then 4, and it may be enough. My selection either finishes because I have the optimum number of photos, or I continue if necessary. Like in this case, if I choose 3 stars ranking, I only have left 51 selected photos. These are the photos which I already sent to the model, which were developed in Lightroom and some of them touched up in Photoshop. That's it. Of course, I will not show you the entire process of sorting out the photos. It depends on your preferences, on your choice. It is just a technique which can simplify a task for you. Yes, it can take a lot of your time. It is always better to start this selection process when you're rested out and your mind is clear. How do I process my photos in reality? To cut the story short, without detailed description of each processing tool, I can say that my processing takes from 5 to 10 minutes. And it is a sequence of Lightroom automation functions because I have a full catalog of presets which perfectly match my photos. I developed these presets long ago. So first of all, I go through my list of presets and I select which processing will be best for this shot, what style of processing I will choose for this photo shoot. For example, I like this preset, I apply it, then I see there is a bit of distortion in this image, so I crop the borders, then I adjust several sliders to set the color balance. Maybe I want my image to be a bit colder or greener. I can increase the exposure a bit and decrease the contrast. So, I quite like this result, and most probably it will be the final processing for this photo shoot. The entire processing took 2 minutes. But it is not the end. As a next step, I select this processed photo and I apply its settings to the series of photos done in the same composition or scene. If the series of images have similar light, background, composition, and camera settings, it means that these presets will be good for the rest of the series. Maybe I will need to adjust something for exposure. For example, this photo is much darker, that's why we can brighten it a bit. This series was photographed under different lighting conditions, so it needs to be a bit warmer and I add more contrast to it. Then we crop it, bring it closer to a movie-like format. Here we go. We already have a result. Yes, it might need some minor adjustments, but nevertheless, these are your presets, and even if they need an additional touch-up, they anyway will help facilitate your processing. Regarding the presets of other photographers, for example, if you want to apply my presets, you need to understand that presets of other artists are first of all a good lesson, as you can look and learn how this photographer did the processing for this or that photo just by checking the settings, the sliders, because it is easy to see in Lightroom. These settings are not hidden. If the presets of another photographer don't suit your own photos, but you like his style, his way of processing, and you are inspired to photograph in a similar style, then try to customize his presets to your photos and save these presets as your own for further application. Of course, such presets will be more suitable for your photos. Each new application and adjustment of a preset improves it further and makes it more suitable for your own works. Of course, I cancel all the changes now to show how to do it manually, because we are here not to sell my presets, but to learn how to do it yourself. Do you like cinema? I'm sure you do. I think any photographer has a lot to learn from cinematography in terms of stylish color grading, a beautiful composition, or some really well-done visual effects. But what's interesting, if we look at a raw image of even a high-budget blockbuster or any beautiful, costly movie, it looks rather modest. It doesn't have high contrast nor saturation, it is rather pale. Why is it so? It is done on purpose to apply any color correction scheme to it later. Because if you initially have an original high, then contrast, sharpness, saturation, then it'll be difficult to process it. Any processing will look excessive. All these parameters which I just listed are interdependent. I think you know that if you give an image more contrast, it automatically becomes more saturated. Sharpness is also a micro contrast along the borders of objects. However, I don't mean that you should preset your camera so that our originals have low contrast. Don't really bother about it. You can photograph with average, normal settings. It's absolutely fine. The main thing is to photograph in raw format. So if we follow this logic, our initial task will be to create a neutral base from our original. We should make a very neutral template. The template will have a lower contrast level. There will be no black or white dots. There will be no domination of a particular color. It will not be bright or saturated. This may sound contradictory to what we're going to do, because we want to improve our original. We want to make it brighter, with more contrast and beautiful. But in reality, if we want to have a high-quality color correction, we first need to neutralize our image, so that it looks nice in any screen and it doesn't have any excessive colors or tones. So these will be our first steps. Of course, everything starts with processing in the basic tab page with basic standard settings. And let's go through one by one. The first slider, set color balance. In order to see the color balance and understand which color we have in the image, we should just move saturation sliders to maximize indicators and visually assess the colors. As I mentioned before, this is our first stage of processing, and our task is not to do something creative or artistic. First, we need to balance it, and for this, we need to see as many colors in the image as possible. So if we have issues with the balance towards warm colors, then we tint the entire image with warm yellow-orange tones. Now we see that we have quite few colors in the image. If we have issues with the color balance being cold, then we tint the entire image with blue and magenta, and we see there are not so many colors as well. Our task now is to find the happy medium at which have the maximum number of colors. Don't be bothered about magenta spots on the model's skin. We are working now with the colors of the entire image. If we have issues only with the colors on the face, We should resolve it with the help of other tools, not just with the color balance. Let's see. I think this position of the sliders causes some magenta spots. We see here purple, blue, and many warm tones, dark blue. We have quite a lot of colors. As we proceed, we will be able to work with these colors separately, and it is an important advantage. The tint slider, I think I will keep it in this position. We bring saturation back to a normal level. We can see that our image became much paler. It also seems it became less saturated, but it is because it was very saturated and a moment ago, and our eye remembers it. Second, the variety of colors increased, but saturation of bright colors decreased, because the slider is somewhere in the middle. At the moment, that's what we need. Let's carry on. Exposure. I think exposure is a rather understood parameter. It is responsible for illumination and brightness on the screen. If you have any issues with the original, it will be possible to correct it with this slider. In our case, everything is quite good. Of course. I will work with the light and shadows, but later. I skip it for now. Contrast. I often decrease contrast in my image by 50, 60, even 80 points. I can easily add it into the presets and apply it almost to any photo. Once again, we do it so that it is easier to do the color correction further on and to extract some more tones from the image, from the colors, from the shadows. That's what we will be doing now. Highlights and shadows are parameters which impact colors and tones. We set the sliders to these positions. We reduce the highlights, revealing from the bright areas as many colors as possible. We lighten the shadows, revealing some details out of our shadows. This general positioning, of course, it can be adjusted up or down, but I have it almost in all my photos. So we got something like artificial HDR effect. Real HDR is done by a series of shots. It is done by bracketing. When several images are taken, one with decreased exposure, another one with increased, and one with normal, and then these images are merged into a high-definition one. What did we do? We revealed details from the lights and shadows of our original, as raw photography has this capacity and provides opportunity to do so to some extent. We do it to create a more detailed image. I like detailed images. My photos always have various tiny items, and I want them visible. We see that contrast is very low now. We decreased it by the parameter as well as by adjusting highlights and shadows. We bring back to some extent the contrast with the help of whites and blacks sliders, but not to a maximum level, as the contrast will be increased later when we operate other tools, but nevertheless we adjust it now to bringing up. Be aware that there is a function in Lightroom. When we use any tool with a locked ALT, helpful hints will appear. If we increase whites with locked ALT, we can see a mask appear over the image, which highlights white dots, the areas where colors or any other details start to disappear. It means we create overexposure. We can see here areas of overexposure in the background and some minor details. We don't have to bother about them. But if it is a portrait photo, we care most of all about our character and the face, so we cannot allow such overexposure on the model's face. So first of all, we should make sure we don't have such areas of overexposure on our model, so we don't adjust excessively, we increase the whites a bit. And if we adjust blacks with ALT locked, we see how black dots appear. We see that they occur mainly in the background and unimportant areas where actually there should be black. But again, these black dots should not appear anywhere on our model, so we decrease blacks only a bit. We recovered some of the contrast of the original, but at the same time we highlighted the details. We revealed details from the shadows and highlights, but the contrast decreased. Then, we recover the contrast with the help of whites and black sliders, but this recovery is not yet to full extent, as we will adjust it further in the tone curve, and we are also not restricted to do some final adjustments later. Lightroom operates in a rather logic way. There are no destructive actions or adjustments. Whereas in Photoshop, if you apply too many layers and then some mistake occurs, but you already glued these layers, you may have to come many steps back following your sequence of adjustments, or even to reopen the original and process it over again. But it doesn't happen in Lightroom. Each slider can be easily adjusted if it seems to you that it did something wrong, so you can always bring the previous settings back. There are almost no destructive actions. Now we switch to the next group of sliders. They are texture, clarity, and dehaze. In Russian, it means the same. Texture, clarity, but dehaze is translated as mist. All these sliders are responsible for contrast, but contrasts of different sizes for different areas. If you already know what frequency separation is, you know that there's a separation for layers of different frequency. It can be high, low, or middle frequency. So, this principle is applied here as well. Texture increases micro-contrast in some tiny areas of the photo, like skin pores, skin texture, materials texture. In our case, freckles, eyelashes, invisible hairs, and other small details. This tool operates in a similar way to sharpening. So its function is to increase sharpness of texture. Do I often increase texture in my photos? Actually, I don't. Not so often. But in this particular case, we are driven by the plot. So according to the plot, our girl is not a glamorous character. She's a woman of courage. So any dirt, spots on her skin, or some strong light contrast are not an issue at all. This is not a glamorous photo. These deficiencies on skin are even advantageous. That's why we can increase texture, her skin complexion, a bit. Clarity slider serves the same function, but works with bigger spots in the picture. It increases contrast in the light-shadow pattern of certain areas. So if we look at the face, there will be some light patches on the skin, which can be accentuated, or we can reduce them. We can make the skin tone softer with the help of the slider. Anyway, if you don't know what benefits can be achieved with the slider, so simply adjust left or right and see what effect most appeals to you. Again, if we increase clarity a bit by moving it to the right, it will not do any harm to our image. We even want the light shadow pattern of the face to look a bit rougher, as our plot allows us to do it. But in many other cases, when my model has a more ladylike character, I adjust the clarity slider, moving it to the left, decreasing it, but again, without going too far. I decrease it by 10, or it can be maximum 20 points. I assess this requirement by eye. I look at the skin tone softens, and I stop when I think it is enough. I think we will not even apply it for this photo. Let's move forwards. We have another slider. It is dehaze. Dehaze translated as mist in Russian. It also works with contrast, but in large light patches. For example, when we have some big sources of light in the photo, let me illustrate it with the help of this raw original. Captured in the image, we have a window which is a big area of light, so dehaze parameter can spread soft illumination of this light source further into the image. It will fill your image with airness. I use this slider quite often, and I normally decrease it by adjusting it to the left, creating this mist in the photo. Although I think this tool was developed to get rid of such an illuminative mist and to increase contrast. This tool works perfectly well with this backlight, but we almost don't need it in our example here. We can make the image softer with its help, but it is not necessary. I would keep this slider at 0 for this photo. And I will repeat this lesson many times during this lesson. I would like this for this photo, or I would like that for this one. I say would because I want you to know that there is not a perfect or universal algorithm which will help you create a masterpiece. There are tools to improve a photo, but each photo requires an individual approach. Don't try to apply one template for all your images. Apply the adjustments which will be good for each individual photo. You should know how to use all the tools, but it doesn't mean you have to apply all of them for a photo. You should only utilize tools and methods which are required at this particular moment. I'm trying to show you by different examples how these tools work, but it doesn't mean that we should apply it to every photo, including this one. The next sliders are vibrance and saturation. These are the tools which can work with saturation. We don't adjust them right now in the end. If the photo looks undersaturated or maybe excessively saturated, we may adjust these sliders a bit. At the moment, I'm quite satisfied with saturation because, as I already mentioned before, we are not trying to do some creative processing. We are just trying to create a neutral template. We will correct the colors later if required. So we proceed to our next stage, and there is a peculiar point here. Even though all the tabs in Lightroom are located in accordance with the order of their application, there's one exception here. It is Camera Calibration tab, or just Calibration, as it is called now. The thing is that calibration parameters are more fundamental to an original photo. If we compare it with working in Photoshop, it will be a first layer, and all subsequent layers you put on the top of it will impact camera calibration. If we decide to adjust calibration at the end of our processing, we will not understand its actual effect. These sliders will work inadequately as they will be impacted by other prior adjustments. So, if we want to use it, better do it right when we finish setting the basic parameters. Many people don't understand how camera calibration works. They don't use this tool. Maybe once they tried to adjust it, didn't understand the point and gave up. Even though it is a rather interesting tool, let's devote some time to it, figure out how it works. The working principle is rather simple. We just need to turn to our color circle and color combinations. First, let's look at our channels, the primary colors. Why should we do it? Because camera calibration is a tool which works with these channels. There are three primary colors in the RGB model, which we operate in our digital screens. They're red, green, and blue. All the rest of the colors which we see on the screen are produced by mixing these primary colors in different proportions. When we operate camera calibration, we operate the primary colors and the channels directly. These are the groups for operation with red channel, green one, and the blue. Let's begin with saturation. It is easy to understand. Saturation simply decreases saturation of a certain channel, but we need to understand that when we decrease saturation of a channel, when we adjust a particular channel, we influence all the colors on the screen, all the colors in the image, but mainly we influence that color which has a higher proportion of the red channel. So if we allocate the sliders like this, we can see that the saturation of the red channel went down, and consequently the colors which contain a lot of red in them. It almost made no impact to the green channel as the slider in here in the middle, and with this positioning of the sliders, the blue channel became more saturated, as well as blue tones and all the colors mixed with blue became more saturated. I think everything is rather simple and clear here. The other part of this tool is hue. It is a tone of the channel. It is a bit unpredictable. Let's look at a different color circle, this one. What do we see now? Let's imagine it is our photo and there are lots of different colors in it. There are almost all colors present here. They are very different, so our image looks very colored. Let's try to position the sliders like this. All the colors in our photo became harmonized. They merged into two contrast colors. We reduced the variety of tones in the photo. All the warm tones merged into orange, and all cold tones merged into cold blue. And what do we see now in this circle? We see our standard complementary scheme. Just the position on our circle is different, so it is orange-blue combination versus teal-orange combination, which we discussed in the first part of the masterclass. This color scheme is used frequently in movies, blockbusters, as well as by photographers because it is one of the simplest schemes. So, just with two moves, we brought all the colors in our image to this scheme. If we locate the sliders in a different way, we will see that our colors merge into other color combinations. For example, such combination here we see orange, green, and magenta. And it matches this combination, a triangle color scheme. Of course, you shouldn't apply to any photo a setting like this. It will kill all the colors in the photo. It will make warm colors look unnatural. The cold colors will look unnatural as well. Yes, it will bring them to some color scheme, but such a setup is extreme. You should use this tool in a smart way and careful. Now we understand which direction to go, because this option is also suitable for our shot. We have warm colors in the lights and cold colors in the shadows. This tool will help us get rid of unnecessary tones and bring our colors to a shared harmonious composition, but we need to operate this tool carefully and make adjustments little by little. So we can move the sliders in this direction for our photo too. Let's come back to it. Here's our original photo, and we already know that we can adjust the sliders a little bit. in this direction and adjust our colors in the photo. That's how, in a small proportion, we decrease unnecessary tones in the photo, creating color harmony for our shot. Let's see before and after. Before and after. Some cold green colors tend to be close to blue, but not enough yet. We pushed our photo towards it already, and the warm colors became more homogeneous. Remember that we used to have magenta colors on skin, arms and legs looked yellowish with green shades, now they all look more harmonious. I want to mention it once again, don't try to resolve some issue in your photo with the help of one tool only. We need to apply a holistic approach to an issue. You should use several tools to achieve the required results. Otherwise, our processing by one tool will be too obvious and visible in the photo. Let's carry on. Now we proceed following the order of the tabs one by one as they laid out. Our next tool is a tone curve, and this is a powerful tool. It allows us to operate the histogram display directly and manually. We can adjust the brightness curve here as well as each color's channel. Some photographers pay a lot of attention and devote time to the tone curve. They may do the entire processing with these curves because it is a powerful tool. But if you're targeted to achieve a certain result, you can reach it by application of several tools to your photo. The curve is one of the tools to adjust brightness. If you understand the curve well, if its operation principles are simple and clear for you, if you like this kind of a tool display, you are most welcome to work with the curve then. If it is not so convenient for you, you can do the same adjustments with the help of other tools, which will be easier to operate for you. I do some touching up in the curve, but it is rather basic. What do I do in the curve? I again split it into thirds, and I create such a light scheme by the S-curve, which is very popular. Why do we do it? First of all, it brings back the color contrast a little, which we decreased in the beginning of our processing. It bends and becomes a bit similar to the Latin letter S, but just a little bit. What else do I adjust here? I adjust the black dot upward a little bit. First of all, I do it to avoid dominance of dark colors and to avoid completely black spots. Second, I prefer this matte effect in the photo, chocolate tones instead of too dark colors. I do the same adjustment on the other side by adjusting the white dot a bit down to avoid excess in white. We need to remember that people look at our photos in completely different conditions, but someone sees your photo on a screen. This screen can be calibrated or not. It can even be a mobile phone screen on a sunny day. Others will look at pictures at night, so your photo will be displayed in different ways. That's why perception is very subjective, but we need to avoid excessive colors. We need to make sure our photo is not too dark or too light. We need to avoid black spots so that the photo looks more or less fine on any screen, even uncalibrated ones, without any significant issues. I keep this setting for the brightness curve for most of my photos. As for the channels curve, I sometimes apply a bit of toning for a photo. But we will come back to this tool in the end of our processing. We will correct the color to our creative taste. Now we switch further to the HSL panel. I think this panel is easy to understand and it is arranged in a very sensible way. This panel is simply a set of all available colors. We don't work with channels in this tab. We don't have to think about our channels. We just see the colors of our photos. Red, orange, blue, and so on, the entire rainbow. The tool is divided into 3 groups. They are color hue, color saturation, and color luminance. So we can pick the required color and move in necessary direction. We should first analyze our photo to be able to understand in what way and which slider to adjust. Let's think together. What do we want to achieve in this photo regarding colors? I would like to reduce the number of some colors. For example, this huge green metal column, it stands out in the photo for no reason. We don't need the green color here. I would like darker tones to be colder in this image and lighter tones to be a little bit warmer. Again, we will create this by a complementary scheme. The colors will be in contrast, and I think it will look nice and easy to perceive. So first, we get rid of these green colors, but I don't suggest to select the green color and just decrease it down to 0. Because in this case, instead of a green column, we will have the same, but in a gray color. It is not a black and white photo, it is a colored one, and our task is to make our colors look harmonious. Our task is not to get rid of colors. First, we tone this green color with blue shade to make it look harmonious with the blue colors which are present in the shadow. Why do we need to do it? We select a dropper of this tool and draw around the green column. It turns out that this color doesn't match the green slider. You see the colors are automatically highlighted. It is not matching to the green slider, but more the aqua slider. We select the slider and move it in the required direction. The required direction is to the right. We just mouse upwards and we see that 2 sliders, aqua and green, are moving in one go. It means that they are both present in this color combination, and we see the changes in color. Our column becomes more green, our turquoise. In this instance again, don't take it too far to the maximum. I'll make it 60, 70 points plus, and our image already looks more harmonious. Do you agree? Because the bright green tone disappeared, but it still stands out in the photo too much. It looks brighter than the background or our model. I still want to make it less saturated. Again, we can do it here with the sliders, or we can again use the saturation dropper and do it directly in the image. I click and hold the mouse and start adjusting the slider down again. Same indicators, aqua and green, are going down even though they are not any longer aqua or green because we changed them here. But these were the initial colors, so we're working with them. We move it down like this and we see that the color is still remaining there. It didn't disappear. Our brain or the brain of any viewer will understand there is some color, but it doesn't matter which one. It shouldn't be saturated. It doesn't have to stand out among all the rest of the colors, so we manage the column. Now let's check the rest of the colors. As for yellow, my recommendation is just to remove this color. That's what I do for my own photos. Of course, not to the 0 point, but I can decrease it easily by minus 80 or 90 points. Yellow is most often a parasitic tone. Often neutral colors like white, black, or gray get these yellowish shades. The yellow tone occurs as a sequence of some overtones in the image or incorrect setting of the white balance. When we get rid of the yellow color, our photo becomes clearer immediately. The neutral colors become clearer as well, the color noise disappears. It makes our image look rich. Please pay attention that there should be no yellow in the skin of a model. Proper skin color should contain shades of orange and red. If we draw with a dropper around the skin, we see that orange and yellow get activated. There are red areas, there are orange areas in the skin, something in between these two colors, but there should be no yellow. Look, we select yellow and we adjust it up to 100%. We see that there is no yellow in skin, but it is present in some minor items around. We decrease it, maybe there will be no visible effect after it, but it will still be valuable for our processing, as it will help us delete color noise, which is invisible for an eye. In many photos, it significantly improves the quality and tone of neutral colors. Just remember that most often you will need to adjust the yellow slider towards minus. Let's move forwards. Now we switch to the color blue. I would like to keep blue in the shadows. However, there are several bright blue cables which, to my view, stand out excessively, and I would like to correct it. But such local color correction of specific items has to be done in Photoshop. Lightroom has a different operation logic. Our actions in Lightroom will be applied to the entire photo. We operate all the colors, all the lights. We work with the entire image by adjusting one slider. So if we have a task to adjust some color of one or several specific items, it is better to do it in Photoshop rather than kill this color in all the shadows and shades just for the sake of some bright little cable. As I mentioned before, we do need blue tones in this photo. But there is a question mark around purple and magenta colors. First, let's see in which areas they are present in the photo. We can just adjust the slider to the maximum and see. This color is present along the veins here, eyes a little bit here, along the jeans. But still, I think it is rather parasitic color, and we obviously don't need it here. Here we can see occurrence of some spots in this area. If these colors are not necessary in our photo, we can feel free to reduce them, but not for 100%. Let us suppress them to 80-90% and forget about them. We don't use so often the whole group of luminance sliders, at least I don't use them. But how can they help us? We remember that the skin colors are concentrated between red and orange. So, if we play a bit with the red slider, we can, for example, accentuate freckles or lips. Why do we have this effect? Because red is more saturated in shadows. Actually, different colors have different indicators of saturation due to interdependence of saturation and brightness. Let me come back once again to our color circle and show you a concrete example. Let's look at it. What can we see? If we look at the red color, it gets more saturated in darker tones towards the edge of the circle, where the brightness decreases and the saturation of the red color grows. But if we look at yellow, the situation is to the contrary. Dark yellow tones are less saturated and it gets more saturated as brightness increases. So different colors have different correlations between their brightness and saturation. It tells us more about interconnection of basic parameters like contrast and saturation, because contrast also influences and changes brightness in certain areas, and consequently saturation changes and so on. As a conclusion, we shouldn't adjust any parameter to an excessive indicator. So, if we decrease brightness of red, we increase its saturation, and that's how we can accentuate some red elements of the face, if it is required by the plot. But if we increase saturation of orange, we can, for example, accentuate the skin itself and make it a bit brighter if it is not highlighted enough against our background. I use quite seldom the rest of the luminance sliders to adjust brightness. I think other tools are more efficient here. If I need to increase luminance in some parts of the photo, I most probably use other photos like radial filters, or I work generally with contrast and exposure, not with brightness of a certain color. That's why we skip it and carry on. Our next tool is color grading. It is a replacement of split toning in the new versions of Lightroom. What do I want to tell you about this tool as well as about split toning? They're not very high quality tools. I think it is rather easy just to tone the entire picture with the desired color. But that's not a path of a professional photographer. We should only achieve proper color schemes and color combinations only through careful selection of colors. This rule works when we select colors at the location and we already process a photo. We adjusted the green color and toned it to be more bluish. We also merged colors to make them look more harmonious using camera calibration. We influenced all the colors in the photo and arrived to the required result. But it is different from toning all the shadows and lights of the image and bringing them to one monochrome color. We never know in what way they will mix, in what way the colors of the picture will mix with the shade of the toning which we will be trying to apply. The result will be unpredictable in this scenario. The picture will look dirty. This kind of processing is always obvious for an observer and it doesn't look professional. So my recommendation is to omit using split toning as well as color grading. Actually, it doesn't do any harm to tone your photo a bit when it is already brought to a certain color composition, if your idea is to make the photo look more fantastic. So, there's no prohibition to make a final mild touch-up with this tool. We will tone this photo too, but we are going to do it later using the tone curve, closer to the end of our processing. Next tab is Detail. In this tab, I add sharpening to a photo. I do it in the sharpening parameter. Based on my experience, over the course of time, I understood that for my camera, for my lens, I need this parameter to be from 90 to 100. It is normal index for this indicator. It doesn't give any noise to the photo. It provides good level of sharpening. Almost always I set sharpening for 90 or 100 and that's it. I don't come back to sharpening again. I don't adjust it in Photoshop, I don't adjust it before posting it in social networks or when I prepare my photos for web and other cases. I added here the sharpness and that's it. Of course, contrast and micro-contrast influence sharpness as well. But regarding this tool, I add sharpness by adjusting this slider. Next slider in this tool is radius. In my processing, it may range from 1 to 1.3. It depends on the scale of a portrait. The more close-up a portrait is, the higher this indicator is. In this case, I would keep it at 1. I don't use the detail and masking sliders in this tool. I don't like the effect this tool makes. If we adjust the slider with locked ALT, we will see that it creates a mask for application of sharpness only along outlines. This tool highlights the outlines and applies sharpness only along the outlines. So we have higher sharpness along the outlines, but in this case we get a soapy effect on the skin. I don't like the way it works. That's why I usually don't touch this slider. I simply skip it. I don't add it. Our next tool is noise reduction, which suppresses the noise, the so-called noise suppressor. As I mentioned already, when I do staged photography, I try to make sure that there is enough light at the location, and I certainly don't use more than 800 ISO. At least I know it is valid for my Canon 6D. I'm aware that if I set ISO for more than 800 as a consequence, the noise level will be too high, which I don't like. But if ISO is low, my camera still generates quite a lot of noise. But I like a bit of noise. There should be some noise in the photo. If it is noise which creates skin texture, material texture, it creates some kind of filmness effect. If we completely decrease noise to a minimum, the photo will look ugly and unnatural. In this case, the photo will look either painted with a brush or excessively digital. It will not be a film photo, I can say. If I had no noise in my photos, I would purposely add it. But I don't have to do it. My camera serves its task well. This noise level is usually enough, and I don't have to add it with the help of a tool. But this level is not excessive to have to suppress it. Well, if I really don't like something about the noise in my photo, I can sometimes adjust the noise reduction to plus 10, 15, maximum to plus 20, but not more. Never more than that. If your photo is rather noisy, adjust it a bit, but not too much. But better, try to avoid and prevent this issue. Better not have excessive noise level in your original photo, so I don't use all the rest of noise reduction parameters. I keep it as it is in the standard setting parameters and apply it like this and not even to every photo. That's why we turn to the next parameter, lens correction. It is a section devoted to several apparatus corrections, if we can call them like this. In the tab called Profile, you can tick two boxes. When we tick the first box, we remove chromatic aberrations. What are they? Chromatic aberrations are parasitic tones, which occur along very contrasting borders. We can often come across these defects on dark objects against a background of a light, bright sky. In our case, these are tree branches, or it can be borders of a roof. I will try to zoom in even more so you can see better. Now we can see well. We can see magenta and green reflexes along the contrasting borders. This is a physical issue, and that's the issue over your lens. This aberration can be stronger or weaker depending on the lens, but they usually occur. That's why we select the box, Correct Chromatic Aberrations. Our automatic tool understands that there are aberrations and gets rid of them. But the result is not always predictable. Either this tool works and corrects this defect, as we can see before and after, or it may not fix the problem, nothing changes. So either it works well or it fails, but you anyway tick this box and include into your presets. As for the next parameter, correction of the lens profile, what does it do? It also corrects physical deficiencies of your lens. To be more precise, it corrects vignetting and some distortion from your lens. Wide-angle shots sometimes have rather visible distortion. I would like to add several words about these tools. Of course, they serve their function, but as for me, I like the vignette effect. If my lens didn't provide such strong vignetting, I would add it myself manually. I like distortion. I like the occurrence of this fisheye effect. Wide-angle effect. My lens doesn't create such a big effect of distortion, as you can see. But if there was no distortion, I would add it myself manually. I think I would do this for this shot, but not now. I will show you later how to do it. So I don't use this parameter. I like all the deficiencies it gives. In Manual tab, we can adjust some parameters, but manually. We can set to a more precise level correction of chromatic aberrations, vignetting, and distortion. I often manually increase the level of distortion, of course without being fanatical. But I feel free to increase it by 10 or 20 points. Then we tick it by constrain crop, and the distorted frames are automatically cropped. What's the point in having distortion, and why do we like it? Distortion gives a photo such unusual curvature effects. And the main thing I like about distortion, let me show you. If our model is somewhere in the middle of the image, all the rest of the guiding items, I will try to increase distortion now, and it will be clear what I mean. Like this. I added excessive distortion, and we immediately see that all the lines, all the leading lines which we have in the image, they start to crumple, they start to rotate and gradually point to our model in the center. There's a special technique which is called leading lines. This technique explains that it is good when you have some lines, some visual indicators in the photo which direct our observer where to look, which point out the main object of the entire composition, attracting our attention to it. So with the help of distortion, we can add these leading lines to each photo. Distortion directs all the leading lines in the photo to the center. If our model is in the center, there are so many lines which will indicate to her or him. But of course, we don't need such excessive distortion in the photo. We don't want anything excessive or obvious. We will add just a little bit like this, 20 points. As for vignetting, I like this effect, but I don't use this tool for it. We will come to it a bit later, and I will show you how to do it. Next tab is Transform. There's a group of tools here which help to twist and rotate a photo in all sorts of ways, but I don't use these tools in Lightroom either. Because if I need to transform my photo in any way, I prefer to do it in Photoshop. It will be more convenient to do it there and provide a more accurate and higher quality result. But there is one more tool in this tab which I can recommend you to use. This tool is Aspect. It, so to say, shrinks a photo along the edges. What do we see? Let's again apply this effect excessively to see what it does to a photo. It shrinks the photo from both sides horizontally, and each person which is present in the image becomes a bit more slender and taller. As if we do slight plastic surgeries, but they happen in an instant, just with a quick motion of a mouse. If you use this effect to a series of photos, for example, you work at some wedding photo shoot and you just with one motion of the mouse, you flatten all the photos, then you apply this effect directly to all the photos, you will get a light effect, which is not visible to an eye, and nobody will ever guess that you flattened this photo. They will just think that you have a magic lens, which makes everyone look a bit slimmer and taller. Girls usually like this effect, as well as a good plastic surgery. But there is one nuance, and this method works if our model is vertically oriented in the image. If she sits or lays horizontally, then the image will be flattened in a different way, and of course we cannot let it happen. Next tab is Effects. Here we also can set an automatic vignette for our image, but I don't do it with this tool either. I will show how I do vignette later. Next tool is Noise. With its help, we can artificially add noise to a photo. As I already said, I would add noise manually, but my camera already manages this task without any additional tools. The noise my lens gives is absolutely enough for me, and I am not going to add the noise additionally. So that's it. We ran through all the tabs and our template is fully ready. Now, we will work with toning tools, which give very light effects, so here we can be a bit creative. we can add a light effect of artistic toning. If I look at this picture, what do I want to adjust here? First of all, I think we should try to make it a bit warmer. We do it not to edit the color, but already to give a photo an artistic effect. And I think I will shift it towards the green color a little bit. I associate such plots with fantasy movies, with the Alien movie, with something spacey, something metal. They're most often either colder green shades present with such themes. We also visit the tone curve and try to tone the image in the channel mode. What would I like to adjust here? I think I would like to add some green tone in the photo's shadows. I hold the black dot and adjust it a little bit, really slightly. I increase it by several points. That's how we achieved such light blue-green toning in the shadows. As for the lights, I think, on the contrary, we will add a bit more red. Yes, something like this. Plus, I promised to show you how I create vignetting. Along with vignetting, I will show you another very important Lightroom tool, which I always use, and it is called radial filters. What are they? They're just a single brush. So just a soft touch of a brush. We could do this touch in Photoshop, but it is more convenient to use this brush in a Lightroom because we are able to change parameters of this brush later at any time in Lightroom. Let's take exposure. This is the exposure brush in the radial filter. It adds exposure very softly and gradually. There's a special gradient to regulate this parameter. It can work inside the circle or we can invert it and then it will be activated for the outside. So we wanted to create a vignette, which means to darken a bit the edges of the image. But it would be strange in this specific image to darken the four corners, because we can see that the light is coming into our model from this corner. So logically, this corner should be lighter than the other three. That's why here we can create a vignette not for the four corners, but for the ones we wish and select. So for this corner I would keep light, and the ones outside our brush I would darken a little bit. Maybe like this, or maybe by adding some contrast and decreasing shadows. So that's the way we do it. We see our vignette is not a standard one along four corners. We created a vignette required for this specific image. We darkened only three corners. You can apply the same principle and work in Lightroom at some minor issues which you think need to be addressed, but locally, without adjusting the entire image. For example, you can apply a radial filter just to the model's face and adjust the color of the face to make the face tone a bit softer, if it makes sense for the plot. Because of the surroundings, if the background looks too rough and the face seems not soft enough, we can increase the clear case. We should make the face a bit brighter because the legs are illuminated more in this picture than the face, so we can rebalance illumination of the face by adjusting exposure or by adjusting shadows a little bit. I rarely involve exposure slider in my processing. I use highlights or shadows more often. I find their effects milder, not so obvious. It is quite possible that exposure will make your dark colors not black enough, but highlights, shadows, they operate separately from the white and black dots, so they can create milder adjustments of colors and shadows. So, we almost have come to the final processed image. Let me cancel all the changes and we see what we had before. That's the picture we had before, and that's what we got after. Before and after. The difference is not huge, but it is visible, and we see these changes in the photo. For some photos at this moment, my processing is complete and over, so it finishes in Lightroom. I tend not to open Photoshop, for example, to clear up some pimples on the model's face or polish it in any way. The plot of this photo is rather live, rather realistic. The model is not some glamorous character, so these pimples are not an issue. They make our photo more realistic. Well, let's do some final adjustments in toning, and we will switch to Photoshop. Like this. I think I will adjust a bit the curve, adding blue color in the shadows. These are the colors I like, so we have now warm colors and lights, and colder tones and shadows. There are some issues with the garbage in this image, but we will address these issues in Photoshop. Photoshop gives us opportunity to adjust an image locally. It gives opportunity to apply certain brushes and directly correct the imperfections we have in the image. Let's go to Photoshop now. I just click Edit in, and I will import this image into Photoshop. Hello, Photoshop. So what do I do in Photoshop? First of all, usually I begin with local transformations. As I already mentioned, Lightroom also has tools for various transformations and cropping, but their spectrum is rather limited and it is much more convenient to do transformations in Photoshop. I'm fond of wide-angled photos and I crop my images to 16 by 9. I like it, and I think that it makes the angle visually wider. It sounds contradictory because we crop the image, but optically it looks wider. It looks more cinema-like. It looks like a shot from a movie. In addition, we look at our photos on wide-angled screens. The era of square TV screens, 4x3, is over. So, I could easily crop photos in Lightroom as well. No issue. But I think if we crop this particular image to 16 by 9, this cropping will visually put pressure on our character. There's no space, there's no air left on the top and on the bottom of the image. The frames of the photo squeeze the character from both sides, making it bend down. I don't like how composition looks in this framing, so I would like to change it a little bit. Yes, I want to change the composition inside and already taken shot. I would frame this photo, let's say, like this. Plus, I would move the model from the center closer to the thirds. In this case, I crop the photo the way I want to crop it, and then I simply take the border of the image and adjust it to stretch to the required angle without any hesitation or regret. That's the way I do it. I just stretch it around the borders, not worrying about it. That's the way I do it. What do we see? We created the required composition, the composition we wanted. We changed the initial composition of the shot and made it fit this photo. And now we got my favorite 16 by 9. Now we have more space for our character. Yes, the background got a bit stretched, but nobody will ever notice it as nobody knew how it looked before. And I already said I like wide-angle images, and now the effect of the wide angle and fisheye has been increased. I see no issue in such changes. I think it looks perfect. Framing and cropping are powerful and at the same time basic tools, which we shouldn't underestimate. Don't forget that even if you have an original and you fail to frame it properly during the photo shoot, you still have a chance to correct it somehow and improve framing. Framing seriously influences the perception of your photo by the viewer. What do I do next? I use further the tools which are not available in Lightroom. For example, plastics, which is called here Liquify. Everyone knows this tool. Let's make another layer just in case. Let's enter the filter and choose Liquify. Its shortcut is Ctrl-Shift-X. I will not pay too much attention to how plastics work. I think you all know that you can just select a pointer, or you can use a push-left tool, and first of all you can correct the figure of the model with the help of these tools. Everything standard here. Models like to have breasts bigger and the waist smaller, and so on. I would like to remind you that plastics is a very powerful tool, and its major task is not about the model's bottom. This tool can do anything. You can straighten some items with the help of a liquefier, you can adjust the horizon line, you can correct the tree crowns somewhere here at the background, you can edit water, you can draw waves, you can adjust some leading lines towards your character, you can direct them whenever you need. This tool serves a lot of purposes. You need to remember it is not only about plastics of the model, even though it is also very important. Choose slender models, and you will not have to use the liquefier a lot. But remember, this may always help you. Most important is not to exaggerate. Nobody should notice that you applied this tool. We don't really need liquefier for the model's plastics in this particular case, so I will not spend too much time for this tool. Next step, which is not available in Lightroom, is deleting garbage and unnecessary items from the shot. So, what do I mean by that? If there are some items which strike your eye and there are quite few of them in the shot and you need to remove them quickly, and if they are somewhere in the foreground or background in this case, I feel free to use different automatic or semi-automatic tools such as healing brushes, patches, spot brushes, and others, so I don't feel guilty to remove some unnecessary sign or litter from the background like this. Yes, I changed the original picture, but again, nobody saw it before. Maybe this metal thing should look like this in reality. Who knows? Let's remove these bright, shiny items. I agree. Now these pipes, stubs look torn and not very attractive, but it fits our composition. Maybe they were like this in reality. Who knows? Let's remove this number. We don't need it. So when we need to correct the background and delete insignificant items in the photo, the automatic tools manage these tasks pretty well. But if we work with the model's face or other parts of the body, the automatic tools will not provide such a good effort. Of course, we want to correct one little pimple, it will look fine. But if we start some long and profound retouch of the skin, then the soap effect will occur. Why does it happen? The reason is that all these brushes take as a template the color and texture which is around And then they mix it and add into the center of the circle. The key word here is mix, so we get a blurred effect. Sometimes it works well, sometimes not. We often can see blurring along the borders of this brush and other nuances. So if we want to achieve high-quality retouching of the skin, first of all, face skin, we should use frequency separation. I'm not an exception. Of course, I always use the same methods as other photographers do. Let me clarify straight away, frequency separation is not one particular tool in Photoshop. It is a method and it can be applied in different ways. But the point is, the point of this method is to separate our image into several layers. There will be all tiny textures like pimples, hairs in one layer, so it will be a high frequency layer. The other layer will reflect color tones, some large light spots, so it will be a low frequency layer. Why do we need these layers separately? It will enable us to operate different tool types for these layers. Because we should apply hard tools for small textures such as a stamp to avoid blurring. On the contrary, low frequency like blurring, there should be no stamps or borders because there are only mild colors, the lights. What is my way of frequency separation? How do I do it? My method is rather common. You can find it in every second video lesson for frequency separation. But let's talk it through. I create two additional layers. You can see them here. One layer I will call low for our convenience. The second layer I will call high. We turn off high for now. We select low. Now we go to the filters. Blur, Gaussian, blur. Then we make our image blurred to such extent the skin texture disappears. Pimples disappear, but there are some middle-sized illuminated spots still available. For example, like here, there's a dark spot on the cheek, a light spot under the eye, light patches on the forehead, on the nose, so we still see them. We should get rid of the whole texture and all the pimples. I think 8 will be an optimum indicator. We press OK, and we open our high layer. Then we go to Image tab, select Apply Image. Here we select our low layer, the initial layer. We will use this layer as a template. Then we go to Blending and select Subtract. As far as I remember, it is called Deduct in the Russian version. Here we have 2, here 128. These are just the required indicators and we need to remember them or just save them into the action one time and they will not alter, or they will always be at the set level. The invert tick box is cleared, we press OK, and we get another layer. This layer contains everything what the low layer lacks, in comparison to the initial image, in comparison to what we had in that layer. So, we have a low layer and all the rest is in the low layer. Everything what was removed by Gaussian blur. We overlap. Now we check. That was our initial image. And this is the sum of our two layers. Nothing changes. These are two layers together. One looks like this and the other looks like this, but when merged, they make up the initial picture, so we did everything correctly. Now, as I already mentioned, we should work with a hard stamp in the high frequency layer. We select a stamp, we increase opacity to 100%, we increase hardness to 100%. By the way, I will share a life hack with you. When you work with a brush or any other tool which has a brush, it is very easy to regulate it by pressing Alt on your keyboard with the locked right mouse button. By moving the mouse to the left or the right, we can change the size of the brush, and by moving up and down, we can change hardness of the brush. It works for all brushes. It is very easy and intuitive motion. You can get used to it quickly. In comparison to switching the brush size on the keyboard by square brackets, this method is much faster and smoother. It enables you to do even more precise in the setting the required size. So let's see how our stamp works. We just copy the clean patches of skin and paste them to defected spots. Try to copy more often new clean skin samples to avoid having too many similar skin patterns. So that's how we clean up the skin. That's the way we do it. Not even afraid to do it, to spoil the color. We're not afraid of occurrence of some color patches. We are working just with the skin texture. We remove directly only some pimples or wrinkles or other defects. Of course, we understand that there are some skin defects, but there are some advantages as well. There are skin peculiarities. One such peculiarity is, of course, freckles. I would never clear up freckles from the face of this model. She will not be herself without these freckles. And certainly, there's no issue that her face is freckled. This is her peculiarity and this is her advantage. And now I'm just showing you how this tool operates in its capacity so that you can understand how fast it can be done and what a high quality of processing we can get. It will take several minutes to remove such a number of freckles, but you should be thoughtful and careful when you operate this tool. Not like I'm doing it right now to save the time of the lesson. There is another point which I would like to mention. If you watch some lessons on frequency somewhere in the internet, you will be suggested to switch to the low layer and spread it with some finger tool, or to select and then spread with Gaussian blur, or to use a patch or method similar to those. I apply an easier semi-automated method. It is frequency separation for the lazy ones. What is it and how to do it? I'm going to show you now. We create another copy of the low layer, so here is a copy of the layer. Then we go again to the filter to blur. Again we go to Gaussian blur. Now we repeat blurring, just increasing its level. We had 8, now we can easily double it. For example, radius will be 16. So we will also have an intermediate layer which is more blurred. For now, we will put a black mask on it, which makes this layer completely invisible at the moment, because there is a black mask on it. We'll take a white, soft brush, and it can be even half transparent, and we can brighten up our mask along even parts of the skin. So we touch up sheer skin areas, trying not to get across the face borders, across contrasting items. We work with this brush along the face. It has a very light effect as I move the brush around. Changes are almost not visible, but it is normal. It should be so. I will finish application of this tool and will show you images before and after. Then you will be able to see the effect. So it took me a half a minute to cover up half of the face. And let's see. Before, after. Before, after. Now, you can easily see that this tool levels up the light shadow pattern of the face. We had shadows around here, on the cheek, along the face bones. We had brighter light patches. Just a quick coating with this brush evens up the skin tone. Does this tool work? Yes, it definitely does. Do we need it in this particular case? Not really. I'm just showing it as an example. I think this processing looks too glamorous for our character. That wasn't the idea, but nevertheless, that's the way to do high-quality retouch. Don't forget to use this intermediate layer as a copy which I showed you. You need this middle layer to accelerate the process. It took us rather long to do this frequency separation to add all these layers. We tried to remember some unnecessary figures. When you have to perform so many repetitive operation stages, just save it into action. What do I mean by that? You perform all these operations only once, and just save them in the action. You anyway will have to repeat them many times over again. It will save you a lot of time, and as I already said, the less time you spend for processing, the more reserves of patience you have left. So if this retouch process seemed rather long and complicated for you, look how it works if you record all these steps into the action. I just click one button, I have all these layers automatically created. It suggests to select the impact of blurring, and that's it. I have all the layers. I have a low layer, I have an intermediate copy of low, already blurred and already with a black mask on. I already have a high frequency layer. I already have a selected stamp to work with. It is not transparent, it is hard. I'm all set up to start working and I will have the same effect. And now the entire retouch process, which I just showed, will take only 1 or 2 minutes. I can attach this action to the lesson materials, but I think it will be better and more efficient if you do it yourself. There's nothing complicated in it. You just have to go to the Action tab, create a new action folder, give it a title, then you press the button to start recording and perform all the steps I just showed you. You create all these frequency layers, you select the tools, and after you have done everything and selected the stamp, you just press stop here, and you save this action under the title and hot button, which is convenient and easy to remember for you. That's it. Don't forget to add into action all repetitive operation you perform in Photoshop. Accelerate your processing, save your time, it will influence the quality of your work. So, we framed our images, we cleared up the garbage in it, if we can call it so. We completed frequency separation. Next step, which we can perform in Photoshop and which is not available in Lightroom, is the dodge and burn method. It is a method to brighten dark spots. Again, just to clarify, it is not a specific tool, it is a method or a technique. The point of this technique is to manually draw a light shadow pattern and add required contrast to the desired extent in selected areas. Why do we need it? For example, you want to add some volume to your model. To make her to contrast with the background, to add some volume to the hair, eyes, eyelashes, or lips, to some elements selectively. This technique works really well with the folds of the clothes. With the help of dodge and burn, we can draw clotheslines where required. Now let's see how it works. We need to create another layer, fill it with 50% to gray. Filling is Shift Backspace. 50% gray, we fill the image and we apply soft light to it. That's it. Now we will apply it to this layer tool, which is called Dodge and Burn. There are 2 tools, but they are applied as one. So, what do we do here? We set a not very high level of exposure for this tool. It can vary from 10 to 20. It will be the impact level of our brush. Now if we draw with the left mouse button, we brighten, so we are drawing with a brightening tool. But if we lock out and continue to apply the same tool, we automatically switch to a darkening tool. Now we are already darkening. We are darkening the targeted items. What is the point in doing this? The point is to manually add volume to the items lacking volume. Yes, it is a manual tool. It is in some way an artistic tool, and you need to be skilled to apply it properly. But you don't have to be an artist to learn how to do it. This skill comes with practice. After you work with this tool for around 10 hours, after you process several dozens of photos, and you will understand where to apply this tool and how to draw with it to add required volume. I added just a little bit of volume to the eye. It seems invisible, but if we compare it to the image before the changes, before and after, we can see that the eye volume is increased rather significantly and it looks more expressive. You can do the same with the lips. It will not take a lot of time. We draw with the darkening tool here along the lip fold. You follow the originally dark lines of the lips as they are. We just highlight them a bit more. And now I touch up the light areas. Just a little bit. Now let's see. Before, after, before, after. Just like after Botox. Looks perfect. This tool can be also applied to hair to highlight some hair locks to make them brighter or darker. We should also cover some folds of the clothes because clothes look more texturized after application of this tool. It looks more beautiful. Before, after. Yes, you can touch up all parts of the model's body. You can draw more lights or shadows where you find it necessary. It will add more volume to the entire character. It will make our character stand out against a less contrasting background. That's already to your preference. Tastes differ, and you stop using this tool whenever you feel it is enough. Of course, better not to use it excessively. When you apply it too much, it will be obvious and visible. It will make your image look artificial and not realistic. It is always better to be reserved in processing and finding comparison. I have this tool also recorded in action. I press one button and I automatically have a layer created with 50% gray filling. Its opacity is automatically set for 70% and the dodge tool is already selected. Why is opacity 70%? I'll explain. I may work with this tool for a while. Drawing like this, as I already mentioned, you should operate this tool only at the low level of exposure, low impact level, to avoid every move of the brush to be visible separately on its own. We don't want visible strikes of brush here. After we work a little bit and we get tired of it, we can add opacity to this tool up to 100%. That's how it was before and after. If it is not enough either, then you can create a copy of this layer to double its effect. So you can adjust opacity in this new layer. Just like this, we can create its effect to the extent we need. Next tool, which I use in Photoshop, and I already mentioned it when we worked in Lightroom and spoke about these bright blue cables. Sometimes we have a task to get rid of some exact color shade, and very locally. I do it with the help of a very simple tool, hue saturation. So here is our corrective layer, hue saturation. It is very simple to deal with these cables. We can just select a dropper here, it looks like this. Click the dropper into the cable, then decrease the saturation as much as you need. Then we invert the mask of this layer into black color, Ctrl E. Then we select the white brush and trace the line of our cable. So we remove the color along the outlines of the brush, only where it stands out and where it is not mixed with other blue shades in the photo. Is it better? I think it is. No, these cables do not any longer strike our eye. Once again, this Photoshop tool hue saturation is very simple. It is a basic tool, but it enables us to set colors very precisely. It is rather powerful. Let's review a different task for it. For example, how to correct spots on skin. It is very simple. This tool will help us again. If we look at this image, we can't say there are serious issues with the skin and complexion. But I know how it was photographed in reality. I know that there was white natural light coming from the left to the model, and in the end of the big garage there was a glass partition covered with a bright red film. On the opposite corner behind the model. I can show this glass partition, I have it in a different image. So there was such a window in the end of this garage. So the light rays from this red window actually reached our model. And if we increase the colors to maximum, we will see that there are red shades on her skin, here. Along the ear, along the neck, there are some red spots. So this tool will help us to get rid of these unnecessary spots. Whether they are magenta, green, or purple, they can be any color. This tool manages such tasks by means of this scale at the bottom of the tab. A lot of photographers or retouch artists don't use the scale. How does it work? We select a dropper, click into the red spot, in our case it is red. Let's increase saturation to maximum level to be able to see the colors which are influenced with this corrective layer. It is working with our image within this range of colors. Even though we selected the color with the dropper, the tool still affects purple shades, yellow, and the entire spectrum of red-orange tones. We don't need such a wide range, so we just start to decrease it. Our spot is somewhere in the red spectrum, so we exclude the orange tone until we have only red spots left. Now we see that the eyelids, which have a lot of blood vessels, lips, the ear, and here is this big red spot from the back window light. They are more reddish than the rest of the skin. We excluded the orange tones, but we still have red spots remaining. Now our corrective layer will impact only these colors, these spots which are remaining. What will we do about them? First of all, we can shift this red color closer to the orange by adjusting very slightly the slider into this direction. Now the red spots turned into orange ones. Plus, we can decrease saturation a little bit. We should decrease it very slightly. We still need this color. We don't want gray spots on skin. We need more orange color to equalize them with the surrounding colors. Let's zoom in and see. The effect should be hardly visible. Now I turn off the layer and I turn it on, off and on. You can see the effect well in the ear. Of course, we don't want this process to impact the lips and maybe some other items. We remember about it and we apply a mask again for this purpose. We can create a black mask and touch up only required areas, or we can remove unnecessary items from the white mask. I selected a black mask and I will touch up only along the ear and this spot on the neck. Let's see once again, before, after, before and after. We had a red shade around this area and just became more orange. It looks now more harmonious with the rest of the skin pattern. So, when applying a particular color spectrum for this tool, we are able to precisely define the exact color we want to work with in the image. It enables us to localize the targeted color and adjust it closer to the other tones, which are close to the borders of this spot. As a small finishing touch to my processing lesson, I would like to recommend you Color Effects plugin by Nik software. What does it do? I don't apply it for every project. I use it quite seldom, but I want you to get familiar with it. It is a group of Nik collection plugins. There you can find a plugin which is called Color Effects Pro. This plugin looks like a list of all sorts of various filters. These are artistic filters which provide different effects to your photos. There are many of them. Look through, try to apply them, see the effect. They are rather distinct. Every filter can be adjusted for your photo. You can set the required impact level. So you can create your own collection of filters, save into your presets to apply them later quickly to your photos. What do I like here? I like classical soft focus filter here. It brightens a photo up with some light. It is a slight effect and is similar to dehaze effect in Lightroom. This effect, as a final touch, may add some airness to your photo. But you should set its opacity, its impact level to 15 or 20%. I also like it here. Cross-processing filters. They also should be selected depending on the plot. You can create a light toning in some cross-processing style. I think I would keep it like this. What can we add here? We can add, for example, detail extractor, but also just for a couple of percent. It has a very powerful effect. This effect increases micro contrasts. We can set it to just 5%. And to finish our processing as a final touch, we can add, for example, a light vignette to this image. We will add it with the help of the Darken Light Center tool. Again, it will not be a classic static vignette which covers all the corners, making them darker. We can select a required center for our vignette, so it will be set at the required corner and center. It will work like a radial filter. As you can see, I decrease its impact down to 50%. I may adjust the general opacity of this tool down as well. I prefer to have a very light effect of these filters. Let's see, before and after, before and after. Seems nothing changed significantly, but just a slight finishing touch. And as I already mentioned, your personal selection of filters and settings can be saved into dedicated folders, creating your own presets, which you can quickly apply when needed. For example, option like this, before and after, before and after. Or let's look at this option, why not? We press OK and all these effects and filters are applied in a separate layer. And further on, if required, we can decrease opacity of this layer right here in Photoshop. By this, we decrease the impact of all previously applied filters. We adjust the slider like this we see before and after, and this way we can set any impact percentage. So let's summarize. In Photoshop, we did the required framing, we did plastics, we removed the garbage, we did frequency separation, we applied the dodge and burn tool, we touched up some spots and colors locally, and we created the light toning and color effects. That's it. That's how I usually process my photos. Moreover, not every photo comes to Photoshop. Before, I did 90% of processing in Photoshop and only 10% in Lightroom. I quickly developed a photo in Lightroom without paying a lot of attention to it, and then did most of the processing in Photoshop. Now the situation is reversed. I do 90% of my processing in Lightroom, and I open Photoshop just when I need to correct some local issues with the help of the tools which are not available in Lightroom. As time goes by, as I become more experienced, I process my photos less and less. Now my processing takes from 5 to 10 minutes. Of course, I do my best so that my photo looks good when it is still an original, so that it looks good in reality, so that this composition can make a good photo regardless of the gear, regardless of processing or any other factors. A photo should originally have a proper color pattern and proper lighting should be arranged at the location. It may sound odd in the context of a processing lesson, but your photo may be only one level up in terms of quality after good processing. So if you have an average original, you can process it and have a more or less good photo. If you have a good quality original, you can process it and get a perfect photo. But if your original is a bad quality, no matter how hard you try to process it, you will not create a masterpiece. That's the essence of a photo. You can redo completely your original, but it will be already something different, not a photo, I think. If you're an artist, not a photographer, you can try. But we are here speaking about photography. Anyway, I hope you learned something new about processing in this lesson. I wanted to show you my own processing techniques, the way I see it, the way I do it, the way I photograph. Of course, if you bought this course and something wasn't very clear and you have any questions, don't hesitate to ask. Send me a message into direct. I reply to everyone. You can send me a message via Instagram, Facebook, wherever you can find me. I will try to answer all your questions. For the second time, I thank you for your attention. Follow me on Instagram. I also continue to learn new things. Let's do this together. So ask questions, send your feedback to this course. I really hope you got to know something useful. Good luck!